My name is Jesse Niebaum. I'm the lab manager and a research assistant in the Building Blocks of Cognition lab under the direction of Dr. Sylvia Bungay at UC Berkeley, and we're in the eye tracking lab. I grew up in Kansas, primarily in a small town called Pittsburgh. My mom went back to school when I was 5 years old to get her bachelor's degree and then her master's degree, and is now teaching at the local university there, Pittsburgh State University. And my dad was a carpenter. I would say that I've taken probably a very crooked path to end up here. My degree is in English literature, and I selected that just because sort of the biggest insights I had had growing up were always from reading books and understanding what characters had done in those books, and that sort of taught me a lot about human nature and taught me a lot about what writing can do for how you think. And during my last year at the University of Kansas, I was taking a seminar on metaphor, and I was very fortunate to be able to become a research assistant in a lab at the University of Kansas that was investigating how people with depression sort of perceive words that are really positive and perceive words that are really negative in different ways compared to people that have never had depression or people that aren't depressed. And that led me more away from the field of English literature into what I would call cognitive linguistics. And that led me here. I emailed Dr. Bungay about my interest in the type of work her lab was doing, and she invited me to come out. The eye tracker is a pretty incredible tool, and I think it's something that has been thus far a little bit underutilized in cognitive science and neuroscience, because although there's still a lot to be learned, we do have at least some idea of what happens in the brain when someone is reasoning, or what happens in the brain when someone's trying to remember something. And we also have a good idea of like what those cognitive skills are in a behavior sense of like we have to compare two things to reason about them, or like here are the actual things that we need to remember. And so one of the things I'm looking at with eye tracking is to determine what it is about individuals who are good at remembering things or have what would be considered a good working memory ability, what they do differently when they're trying to remember things. How are they maintaining that information? How are they rehearsing or manipulating that information? And that turns out that's something that eye tracking would be really amenable to investigating. So seeing how they manipulate things on the screen to remember them can tell us a lot about what makes someone good at working memory or what makes something poor at working memory. What's really great about our lab is that we do seem to have a really diverse set of people on a personal level. We've had lots of students come that are non-American, and several exchange students that have come to the lab, and that's not to mention the several undergraduates that come to help do research. But what's especially great about what the lab has grown into since I've been here is that everybody's really open to being asked questions, and everybody seems to have a true desire to figure out what we're all investigating. And so it's been really great because I came in knowing so little to know that there are so many different resources in lab that I can turn to, and we can, build something together or try to understand something together, or at least talk it over to ask more specific and better questions. It's fun enough just coming into lab as a place to come work. But more generally, I think that the things that we're looking at, they're going to be very important in just understanding how the brain develops, how the brain works, but also down the line will be helpful in understanding and amending educational policy to make it better than it is already. And the type of work that we're doing will hopefully be able to help identify whether or not children are ready for a particular concept, or whether or not they're going to benefit from a typical education policy, and be able to also determine how much of an impact some educational policy or some concept will have on helping a child learn. And just knowing that the type of things we're doing here, even though they seem a little bit unrelated, they're doing tests on the computer, are going to yield important benefits for education and for children and for helping kids develop the best they can.